Hi, welcome to the Gear Garage. My name is Zach, and this is my little internet show about whitewater things. In this episode, I want to talk about oar frame placement. But before I do, I want to just remind you, take a second, please hit the like button. I'd really appreciate it. Subscribe if you want to. I'm working hard on this show, want to make it valuable, and the way you can pay me back is like and subscribe. So with that, let's get started. So with oar frame placement, there's a lot of opinion here. I have opinion I'm going to share. I think my opinion is based off of science, but I could be wrong. This is just like my experience, and if you have thoughts, as always, add them in the comments. This is just my thinking about where to place frames on a raft for optimal rowing. So I think there's two principles here. You want the mass distributed evenly and as close to the center as possible, and you want to pivot close to the center. So ideally, your oar locks are on the center. The problem is if you're sitting behind the center, like if the oar locks are in the center, you're sitting really far behind. If you're by yourself, the boat's going to do a wheelie, and that's not optimal. So for like a light oar frame or for a cataraft, I'm going to suggest split the difference. Put the center of the boat halfway between your seat and your oar locks. That way that your mass is pretty close to the center, the oar locks are close to the center, and the mass is around the center. The more you pivot around the center, the better it'll be, and the more your mass is centered around the center of the boat, the faster it'll turn. If you have mass on the bow and the stern, it's going to be harder to turn the boat. So you want to try to concentrate as much mass as you can towards the center, but there's challenges doing that. Frames aren't perfect. So again, by yourself, what I like to teach is put the center halfway between your seat and your oar locks. Now, if you have a bunch of extra weight, yeah, then maybe move your oar lock center and put the weight up in the front if you have a way to tie it in. But if you're in a cataraft or something light, and again, just a raft and a frame, this is what I'm going to do. Next, if you have a gearboat, things are a little bit different. Because on a gearboat, you typically have people in the front. And the most dangerous part of the raft, in my opinion, with people are the oars. If you're sitting here and you let go of your oars for some reason and people are in front of you, they could get unexpectedly smacked in the back, in the head. It's super dangerous. I've seen somebody smacked in the back of the head with an oar before. It is ugly. It's not something you want to have happen. So what we do when we have oar frames, and hopefully this makes sense. I'm sorry I hand drew this. I'm not an expert artist here. But this is what I'm going to call a 4-bay frame. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 openings. And what I'm going to do is put the rower in the back sitting on a cooler or a box or something, and people sitting up in the front here. That way, if they're rowing and their oars go forward, the oars kind of swing into this compartment and can't hit the people in front. And so this is a safety thing. This is not optimal rowing. Optimally, you move the oar locks to the center and the rower center, but then the people will also be right by that and they could get hurt. So our goal here is to separate the rower from the people. And in my opinion, I'll take a less effective rowing position if I can be better at keeping people protected. Now, maybe I'll mess up and whatever, but I honestly, in a lot of ways, would rather flip a raft or make a mistake than smack somebody with an oar. So I'm going to go to great lengths to avoid having oars near people. So again, we'll put people sitting way up here, the rower back here, and what that does is it forces the oar locks back. The oar locks are behind the center of the boat, which is fine. They can be behind. It's not optimal, but again, it's providing better safety for the people up here. And then our goal, again, is to put as much weight as you can towards the center. So you want weight here as much as you can. You want to try not to put too many things in the bow and the stern, but sometimes you can't avoid it. Right? You just have to deal. And the more weight you put in the boat and the more you make it further from the center, the more difficult it is going to be to row. Now let's talk about Idaho Style really quick. Here's called Idaho Style or North Fork Payette Style. A lot of people rowing a boat like this are going to push their frame up. And so that their pivot point is at the front and their weight's at the front. And it's a very aggressive way to row. And it's very much how you need to push this way. It's really hard to pull when you're this far forward, right? That almost the person sitting is at the center or in front, and the oar locks are in the front of the boat. And in this case, you're just pushing through laterals. You're kind of attacking the river. And it works really well on a river like the North Fork of the Payette. It wouldn't work well on something like Cherry Creek that's more like steep drop technical. And so this is a decision you'll make for a certain type of river to push it forward. I wouldn't recommend applying that to gearboats. If you have a cataraft that you run center mounted, I wouldn't recommend doing that and then putting gear behind you. It works, but I think you'd have more success when you're running gear to go back to the center and then spread the gear around. And of course, if you have people, you could row in the front and put the people in the back, but it's just sort of, I think for the people, they're just sort of sitting there behind you. It's weird. And so if you're running a cataraft of people, which is something people do, put the frame in the back of the cataraft and the people up front with that distance. So just to recap really quick, when you're mounting your frame on your boat, you have some goals. I would say your goals are have the oar pivot as close to center as possible, have the mast as close to center as possible, centered around the center if possible, and those two things will conflict. You'll have to have a dilemma to like pick one or the other. And finally, keep the other people in your boat up far from the oars, right? You want to position this, and I think this is really critical. You want the people sitting there relaxing or paddling, whatever. You want to create distance between the rower and the paddlers, and I would prioritize that. So, as usual, if you have questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, anything to add, things to teach me, funny stories, leave them in the comment section below. And yeah, see you next episode. Thanks.